Hey guys, how's it going? It's Jeff here with Automotive Enthusiast Society, and today we're going to be talking about the 25-year import ban on all your favorite vehicles and everything from overseas that you wish you never got. Let's get into that. So, I spent some time researching the topic of the 25-year ban, which is something that's sort of a soft spot, considering all the vehicles that we got in the European and Japanese markets that were never available to us in the US. So, what I did is I decided to go to the Customs and Border Protection website. Was the first one I found that had information on the 25-year import ban, as it's called. Some people you'll also hear it get referred to as the sort of gray market for cars. And what it is essentially is there was a series of cars that were banned from being imported into the US, usually based on safety or emissions regulations that are more strict in the US than they are in a bunch of other countries. So for example, with the Skylines in particular being one of the more popular topics of cars that were not imported to the US, these Skylines had, I think, a bit of both, and the Japanese manufacturer Nissan just never felt that it was important enough to try and build those cars to sell them in the US. And then, lo and behold, when Fast and Furious comes out, everyone now wants the Skyline, and so the next generation that would later come out as the R35 would now be available in the US. So, as the reason it's mainly called the 25-year import ban is because of the way the law works. So essentially what it is it's at 25 years, once a car hits 25 years old, you can essentially import it with no issues other than, your import, finding somebody to import it for you, getting the car, and then just getting it through Border Patrol. Once you get past all that, then it's just super easy to get your car, and it will essentially be worry-free once you get it registered in the US. There's some other things around that. I know some of you have probably seen how some of the cars get in here earlier than they originally were. So there's some drivable R34s and other stuff. And a lot of that has to do with the laws regarding the show laws. So essentially you can bring in a car, and if you can claim it as being a sort of like historic piece or like an important informational teaching thing, you can bring that car in under the show, I can't remember the name of the law, but it's a show and tell type of thing, essentially. You can't put more than 2,500 miles on the car in a year, and you can really only take it to like shows and like keep it in the showroom and stuff like that. So that part's not as exciting, but that's where you'll see some other cars that are already in the US. The other ones are cars that have been able to import them somewhat early, and then we're able to modify the cars to make them street legal and meet the DOT requirements that were in place. So the first one that I know of is on 21 years. So at the 21-year mark, the car no longer has to adhere to the EPA regulations and restrictions, which means if you wanted a car that was 21 years, you could now import it into the US with that stuff, but it would not be road legal. So from there, it would be up to you to then try and meet the emissions and safety regulations for the car, usually meaning that you have to heavily modify it, possibly using crash test stuff to get the car road legal, and then you can drive it that way. Now at 25 years, all of the DOT regulations and all that no longer apply the same way that they did, so the car is now 100% legal to be imported without changing the car at all, given like a lot of that, like I said earlier, the safety and emissions stuff. So that's the most common way, and that's what you'll see a lot of people doing. One of the videos I watched today talked about how it can cost as much as $250,000 just to get a car crash tested, registered, and regulated to get into the US using that 21-year law that I sort of mentioned earlier. So it's just too much work for importers to be spending that much money on these cars, and it significantly increases the price of these cars that are available. So now, given that I said that the law sort of applies to the US as a whole, there are a few exceptions. The law mainly applies to the 48 states. And so as you can guess, there's 2 states that don't allow this law, and even then would require more work on the cars to make them street legal, and thus you won't see a lot of importers selling the cars in those states, or at least have them be street legal when they're sold. So the 2 states are California and Hawaii. Not a big surprise there. California sort of being the leading in terms of emissions and automotive laws that are changing all the time, as we know, with the exhaust laws that have changed in the past. And then Hawaii, of course, because it's an island and it's really hard to really get anything in Hawaii. So that one's always going to be sort of stuck as it is. But anyway, so if you live in those 2 states, sorry, that sucks. maybe come to the other states if you want to see these cars. So for the most part, a lot of these cars that are coming, there are some versions that have never ever seen the light of day in the US. For example, some of the RS2 Advance, the Audi station wagons, the Skylines, and then the first generation of the Evolution and the WRX. Those cars have never been in the US, and so this is a chance for those people to finally get their hands on some of that rally heritage. The other thing is that a lot of these cars are going to be the higher spec performance versions of cars that we did get in the US, just not in the same level. So a lot of the ones that come to mind would be the E36 BMW. While we did get that, we did not get the M3 with an extra 40 horsepower on top of it. In terms of Japan, even when some of the later Evos that we did get, like the 8s and the 9s, we did not get the higher spec versions of those. So with this sort of import ban rule, you can now get some of those cars that were once unobtainable, and you can now get the higher performance versions without just slapping a badge on it and calling it good. So that aspect's really cool, because now we can get these really rare cars, and we should expect to see a lot more of them. While a lot of what I mentioned are JDM and Euro cars, that's pretty much everything that we care about that doesn't get imported, but it is a variety of different cars within that. So for example, we have a lot of the JDM cars. Some of them were street and track legends, but at the same time, we have a lot of rally cars that were never like introduced to the US. So the first ones that come to mind, as of 2019, you can now get the Mitsubishi Evo 2 from the first generation Evo. You can get the WRX STI, the first gen, with the 4 doors and everything. That was never available as an STI. And then you can also get the Toyota Celica GT4. So those are some rally cars, for example, that are now available that were not originally sold in the US. Some track versions being the Nissan Skyline GTR, V-Spec 2 is now available as of 2019, and another year of R33s are now available in the US. So that's super cool there. There's also a lot of Ferraris, the F355, and there's the Lamborghini Diablo. I can't remember the exact spec, but there's a couple different Ferraris that are now available in 2019 as well. A couple cars that you won't often see mentioned, there is a Nissan Silvia 270R Nismo that's now available in the US. There's the Porsche 911 993, one of the last of the air-cooled Porsches, is now available to be imported. Of course, you can now get the Mitsubishi FTO available as well. So unfortunately, a lot of the really, really cool cars that a lot of us are waiting for, not saying these aren't cool, I want an R32 myself, but a lot of the really highly anticipated cars that are coming out still have a little ways to go. So the first ones that come to mind are the Nissan Skyline GTR 34. And that one was, the first year of production was in 1998. So that car actually won't be available until 2023. An interesting fact about that one is because it's so close to being available for import in the US, the values are actually skyrocketing of these cars. I know a lot of people are trying to get both the 4-door versions and the GTR versions to be imported into the US. So if you want your GTR, you really pretty much have to buy them now and then get them on their way over to the US. So by the time it hits 2023, you'll be able to get your GTR at a reasonable price. I imagine it'll be something sort of like what we're seeing with the Supras, with how high the value shot. It'll be similar with that to the R34. The other car, and one of my personal favorite Nissans, is the Nissan Silvia S15. Now, unfortunately with that one, the first year of production was 1999, and so that car won't be available for import until 2024. So it's a super interesting sort of law. I'm glad it exists in the sense that we can actually import those cars rather than not at all. Of course, if you really wanted to, you could always go over the top and get your car, import it, and then do all the necessary changes to make it road legal in the US. Or you could do that showroom law and just import it and drive it less than 2,500 miles a year if that's all you really care about. If there's a car you're really interested in seeing when it will be available to be imported, there's a lot of websites that can give you just the different years of the cars, as well as looking the car up and seeing when the production years were, because it does have to be 25 years from the time of production, month, day, all that stuff. So another thing that's really fun, if you have any extra spare time, what you can do is you can actually go online and you can find these different lists that people have composed of different cars that are going to be available at different years. So there's a huge variety of information in there. There's even some cars that I've never heard of. There's lots of Peugeots, even the Renault Williams. There's just all these other cars that you might have never heard about that are now going to be available for importation. What I'm personally looking forward to is I'm hoping in about 5-7 years time, when this importing stuff gets more and more popular, I'm hoping to see more of these cars at various car meets and car shows. And so it'll make it a lot more interesting when every car meet and car show is a very international show and you can see the different JDM versions versus the American versions originally. But that's it for today's episode. If you guys enjoyed that, please like, comment, and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to keep out for new content. Don't forget to look at more of our videos. And then as always, see you guys next time.